Hey guys, it's SportsDude13 here, and today we're going to go over the final results of the group stage for this year's World Cup to see who finished in the top two in each group, as well as the 8 best third place teams, and for those that are eliminated as well, and the first game of the knockout stages for this year's World Cup, as we'll go over that. So, starting off with Group A, Mexico was able to go 3 for 3 in their group, winning all 3 of its group stage games. So they finished the group perfect after beating Czechia 3-0. This eliminates Czechia from this year's World Cup. And for Mexico, this is the first time that they finished perfect in a group stage at a World Cup. So this is probably the first time that I've seen a country outside of Europe and South America finish the group stage of a World Cup perfect. So, and Mexico would be playing its first 2 knockout stage games in their home country at the Azteca. Then, meanwhile, South Africa shockingly beat South Korea 1-0. In the Battle of the Souths. The battle of the 2 countries with South in their names. It was won by Bafana Bafana, and it was a huge 1-0 win for them, as they made it helped them make the knockouts for the first time ever at the World Cup. And for South Korea, this unfortunately eliminates them, which we will get to once we get to the third place teams. So South Africa, historic achievement for them going to the knockouts. And then Group B, Switzerland wins that group after beating Canada 2-1. Had Canada scored a late goal in that one, that would have tied the game and would have possibly won their group, then Canada would have played its first few knockout stage games in their home country, but instead they had to play the rest of the knockouts away from their country, so the rest of their knockout stage games would be played in the U.S. And then Bosnia was able to qualify as one of the best third place teams. That's why you see the blue square there next to them. And then Qatar, as expected, they're eliminated. Group C, as expected, Brazil, Morocco to the knockouts, and then Scotland finishing third, and then Haiti, they finish last. And I did forget to mention, Bosnia had to beat Qatar 3-1 to kind of punch their ticket to the knockouts to at least make it in. And then Brazil beat Scotland 3-0, and then Morocco beat Haiti 4-2. And unfortunately for Scotland, this would eliminate them. Their goal difference was what kind of killed their hopes. And then we go on to USA's group, Group D. USA, despite losing to Turkey, going into that game, they have already won their group. So, this loss doesn't really affect USA or anything, just because we played some of our subs and rested some of our starters. But Ballista did come on the second half of that game, but Turkey did score at the end. So, at least Turkey, yes, that's probably their best moment they have of this World Cup, despite it being disappointing and all, after they lost the first 2 games, which got them eliminated. And then Australia and Paraguay, a scoreless draw was enough to move both of them on. Australia finishing second in the group, and then Paraguay moving on through one of the third place spots. Then Group E, Germany lost their final group stage game to Ecuador, but Germany had already won their group, so Ecuador had to win in order to make the knockouts, which they did. They beat Germany 2-1 just to get into the knockouts. And they saved their World Cup hopes after it looked like it was going to be disappointing, but thank God they scored. I was just so happy for them. And now we'll get to see them in the knockouts, in which they'll play Mexico, which they might give them a hard time. So, and then Ivory Coast, they finished second in the group after they beat Curacao 2-0. So that qualifies Ivory Coast to the knockouts of the World Cup for the first time ever. And they'll get to play Norway. And then we go into Group F. Yep, Netherlands won their group after winning their final group stage game against Tunisia 3-1, who had already been eliminated. And then Japan and Sweden, a scoreless draw was enough to move both of them on, but Japan finishes second and Sweden moving on through one of the third place spots. Then in Group G, Belgium, thanks to their 5-1 win against New Zealand, their goal difference was enough for them to win the group. And Egypt, yep, despite drawing with Iran 1-1, yep, it was enough for Egypt to move on. But Iran did score what looked like to be the winning goal that would have sent them to the knockouts for the first time. But VAR took their goal away thanks to one of the Iranian players' foot being offside. Yep. Now, had the goal counted, then Iran would have been in the knockouts for the first time ever, but instead they are eliminated, which we will get to another game that involves another group, so which ultimately also caused Iran's elimination, which we will get to in a sec. Then we go into Group H. Spain wins their group. They're the only country in Group H to win any of their games. Well, they won 2 out of 3, but the only draw coming to Cape Verde, which came in their first group stage game. But speaking of Cape Verde, despite drawing all 3 of their games, it was enough for them to make it to the knockouts through in second place in the group. So, which is crazy to think about. And unfortunately for Uruguay, they could not score the tying goal against Spain. If they had scored a goal in that game, then they would have moved on to the knockouts, but unfortunately, they did not. Yep, so Uruguay's second straight World Cup in which they failed to make it to the knockouts. Yep, and this is the first time ever that I found out that Uruguay's failed to make it to the knockouts in consecutive World Cup appearances. Kind of feels rare for anyone to say that since they are usually one of those big-name countries. So they're probably the only big-name country that's not in the knockouts of this year's World Cup among the countries that are in it this year. And then Saudi Arabia, yeah, they finished last after not beating Cape Verde, that game ending in a scoreless draw. And then Group I, which is arguably the group of death of this World Cup. France beat Norway, although Norway rested its starters, so Aaron Haaland did not play in Norway's final group stage game. And France, the second country at this year's World Cup to win all 3 of its group stage games, along with Mexico, but Mexico is the only one to not allow any goals among the ones that have finished perfect. So France finishing first, and France, they'll play Sweden in the knockouts for its first knockout game. And then Senegal, that 5-0 win against Iraq was enough for them to move on as one of the third place teams. And for Iraq, yep, they finished with the worst goal difference of any country in this year's World Cup. Then in Group J, Argentina was able to complete for perfection the group stage with a 3-1 win against Jordan. So Argentina, the third country in this year's World Cup to finish the group stage perfect. And then Austria and Algeria, that game yesterday was probably one of the craziest games that I've ever seen. Yeah, that ending, yep. It was just back and forth, yep. It looked like, Algeria scored the winner in stoppage time. What looked like it would have moved Iran into like one of the last third place spots. But then Austria scored at the end. The tying goal. They scored the tying goal at the end, and it put them in the knockouts as well. So, yep, unfortunately, that's what caused also Iran's elimination. Not just the offside goal that was taken away for Iran that would have won the game against Egypt, but also Austria's tying goal against Algeria. So, yep, do feel a little bit bad for Iran, but hopefully if they do make it to like any future World Cups. Hopefully one of these days we'll get to see it in the knockouts of a World Cup. Then we go into Group K. Colombia wins their group after holding Portugal to a scoreless draw. They should have also been 3-for-3 in their group stage, but unfortunately that VAR took away their winning goal, which was called offside, obviously by a foot. Kind of similar to how VAR took away Iran's goal. But regardless, Colombia wins the group. Portugal finishes second. And then DR Congo, they were able to beat Uzbekistan to move on as one of the third place teams. And then Uzbekistan are eliminated. And then Group L, England with a 2-0 win against Panama to help them win Group L. And then Croatia, a 2-1 win against Ghana, helped them punch their ticket to the knockouts as well. And for Ghana, yep, they settle for one of the third place spots, but they're in the knockouts as well. And for Panama, they're the only country in this year's World Cup to not score any goals. Yep, which is unfortunate for them. And the only countries to not allow any goals in the group stage is Mexico and Spain, but Mexico is the only country to finish 3-for-3 in the group stage while not allowing any goals at all. So they're having a great tournament as the hosts. Then we go into the third place teams. Yep, DR Congo, Sweden, Ghana, Ecuador, Bosnia, Algeria, Paraguay, and Senegal all make it in as the third place teams in this year's World Cup of the knockouts, with Senegal being the only country that has had 3 points to group stage that's in the knockouts, thanks to their goal difference. Yep, Iran so close. Yep, if only that goal was not called offside, obviously, thanks to a player's foot, just by a foot, as well as Austria's game-tying goal against Algeria. So those are the reasons why Iran fell short of the knockouts. So, and then a few more things to point out. Before the knockout stages started today, with Canada beating South Africa 1-0. In the entire group stage of this year's World Cup, there have been 215 goals scored, and there were 2.99 goals scored per game in the group stage. I did say before this World Cup, I won't be surprised if we had over 200 or more goals in this year's World Cup, and guess what? It surpassed that number. It did. So, yep. I actually called it before just the World Cup even began. Because due to the World Cup expanding, I was like, there's going to be more goals, and there have been more goals. And I wouldn't be surprised if there was going to be 200 goals. There has been over 200 goals. So, yep. That's one of the things I'm right about this World Cup. And then an update about the Golden Boot race. Messi still sits in first with 6 goals. He has scored a goal in every game for Argentina at this year's World Cup. He also set the record for most consecutive World Cup games with at least a goal, with 7 consecutive World Cup games while scoring one. But this dates back to the last World Cup, dating to Argentina's round of 16 win against Australia. So yep, hopefully Messi continues to score more, so that way he can secure the Golden Boot. And then, but right behind him are 4 other players that are trying to catch him. Erling Haaland of Norway, Mbappe of France, Vinny Jr. Brazil, and Dembele of France. So you have 2 Frenchmen, a Norwegian, and a Brazilian that are trying to catch Messi there, both of them sitting at 4 goals. Well, tomorrow we'll get to see Brazil in action, so we'll see if Vinny Jr. scores against Japan. So, and then in a few days we'll see how many more Mbappe and Dembele add on. And same goes with Erling Haaland in Norway. Right now, Messi, who adds to his record now 19 goals in his World Cup career, which is a lot. So, yep. And now I'll show you guys what the knockout stage bracket looks like for this year's World Cup. Although Canada has already beaten South Africa today 1-0 thanks to thanks to a winning goal in stoppage time by Eustáquio, which, in my opinion, that's the biggest moment Canada's had in its history among their national teams ever since Sidney Crosby's golden goal for Canada's hockey team that won them the gold medal in the Olympics back in 2010. So with Canada beating South Africa, they'll play either Netherlands or Morocco, and that should be a very good game tomorrow. And then some other good knockout stage games you'll see here that'll happen, which include Brazil and Japan, like I mentioned, and then you have Germany against Paraguay. And USA's first knockout stage game will be this upcoming Wednesday, in which it'll be against Bosnia. We should beat Bosnia. We should. Hopefully that'll be the first time I see USA win a knockout stage game at the World Cup. And I'll be streaming my reactions to that. I'll also be streaming my reactions to Argentina's first knockout stage game of this year's World Cup against Cape Verde. So that's all I gotta say for this. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to join the Sports Dude Nation. And I'll see you guys later for when I go over once the round of 16 of the 2026 World Cup is all set up.